hardly a man is now alive. Listen, my children, and you shall hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere on the 18th of April in 75. Hardly a man is now alive. Put Mr. Drexler and Mr. Parker on the high hill by the I-Interstate 15 bridge, and we'll stop these cattle rustlers, the BLM, and their thugs sent by the federal government on orders of Harry Reid. Welcome to live show tonight, Friday night. It must be the live show because it's Friday night. Taking my hat off for you people who tuned in. The most important thing we have in our country is a tradition of the Bill of Rights going back more than 200 years. I have in my hands here right now an actual original printing from the State Archives of Connecticut. I want to read you, and this is, I'll show you the front page. I think we can get it on this other camera here so you can see it. It's really the real thing, people, the real thing. State of Connecticut, see the date down there at the bottom? 1830 what? Read it, people. Got that? 1835. This is an original printing. This is not a copy. This is not a copy. This is the original from the state of Connecticut. Now let me read you what was written here more than 180 years ago. It has the Connecticut Constitution and its amendments and a lot of things that we hardly ever hear about anymore. It also has the Bill of Rights. The first article, now this is the article of the United States Constitution from an 1835 official archive book of the state of Connecticut. Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion, or prohibiting free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Now, you can read any current copy of California or Texas or Hawaii of the U.S. Constitution. It'll read exactly identical. That has never been amended or done away with. Article 2, seen right here in this 1835 book, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Period. Then those are familiar. And why the Second Amendment is important, because in the last trial against the Bundy defenders in that wicked witch of the West, Gloria Navarro, she refused to let anybody mention the First or Second Amendment. It was not permitted in a federal court, which is why the wicked witch, a.k.a. Gloria Navarro, in her kangaroo court, should be indicted for high treason, as well as impeached and removed from office. Now, going on, it has 10 other articles. The power is not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited, this is Article 10, the Amendment 10, prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. Now, this is really relevant to the Bundy Ranch showdown in April of 2014. I wasn't there. I did talk to Carol Bundy, the wife of Cliven Bundy, on the 14th around midnight. But why is Article 10 relevant? Because the BLM did not exist when the Constitution was written. It didn't exist when the state of Nevada was formed. And the Bundys were there doing their food growing and cattle raising early in the statehood, and they filed for their grazing rights. So they didn't need to keep paying anybody for their grazing rights. It was already established. They certainly didn't need to pay the BLM or any federal agency. But more interesting, if you keep reading in this 1835 volume, remember I showed you this book. This is the cover. This is the edge of it. There is another interesting thing in this 1835. It has 11th article, about judicial power of the United States shall not be construed to extend to any suit in law or equity commenced or prosecuted against one of the United States by citizens of another state or by citizens or subject of any foreign. Then as Article 12, the electors shall meet in the respective states and vote by ballot for president and vice president, one of whom at least shall not be an inhabitant of the same state with themselves. They shall name in their ballots the person voted for as president, and in the distinct ballots the person voted for as vice president. And they shall make distinct list of all persons voted for as president and all persons voted for as vice president, etc., etc. That goes on for most of this page. But then below that, on page 19 of this 1835 actual document printed officially for the state of Connecticut, is Article 13, or what we call today Amendment 13. How could that be a 13th Amendment in 1835? Ding, 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 ding. Don't zone out yet. It reads this. It's very simple. It's one long sentence. If any citizen of the United States shall accept, claim, receive, or retain any title of nobility or honor, or shall, without consent of Congress, accept and retain any present, pension, office, or emolument of any kind whatever from any emperor, king, prince, or foreign power, such person shall cease to be a citizen of the United States and shall be incapable of holding any office of trust or profit under them or either of them, period. That's pretty short for an amendment. Well, what does that mean? In the side column of the copy I hold from 1835, the state of Connecticut, it says citizenship forfeited by acceptance from a foreign power of any title of nobility, office, or emolument of any kind, etc. In other words, it doesn't say something that has no meaning. It has a very specific meaning. When Gloria Navarro is addressed as Your Honor, and she accepts that and says, no, I'm just a referee, is what she should say, or I'm just a judge, I am not honor. As soon as they accept that, they've lost their citizenship. So Gloria Navarro, every day she sits in that courtroom and people address her as honor, and she has a plaque probably, I haven't been in her courtroom, in front that says Your Honor, or the Honorable Gloria Navarro. She has violated Amendment 13, which was ratified, proposed in 1810, ratified by 1812, published in many New England states and the new coming states. I think the Virginia Statute at Large show it in 1819. This amendment, well, what's this talk about nobility, emperor, king, prince, or foreign power? Well, a foreign power doesn't have to be a state or a nation. A foreign power could be an organization such as the Masons, that's international and goes by its own creed and code. Or it could be a branch of the Illuminati, which is secret and subversive of all nations, to make them kneel and bow to the agenda of the Illuminati. No, they put there or foreign power very specifically. It wasn't, just something we'll throw that in too. No, they knew exactly what they were writing, because in 1810 is when the first central bank of the United States 20-year charter expired. And when it expired, President Madison said, I'm not going to renew it, because these bankers that owned the first United States central bank would extend credit and then pull it in to force people to lose their businesses, whether it was a shipping line or whatever. And then they would take possession of it, literally stealing the idea, the work effort of many early Americans. This was the reason for the original 13th Amendment. And they used attorneys to go into American courts and claim this, that, and the other thing. Pretty soon they started to promote their attorneys to be judges, which prior to that time, in every single state that I've examined, it was people like you and me that got old and had a sense of what was right and wrong and what was good in our community and not good in our community. And we were elected judges. And we would sit as referees and look at both sides of every issue that came before us. Now that's been done away slowly, starting just before the Civil War. It didn't really take hold. After the Civil War and during the Civil War, there was a great promotion of a thing called the Bar Association. And New York City had one of the first. It was the Bar Association in New York City. And initially, many attorneys in New York City refused to join. So I don't need to belong to that. I'm a lawyer. I'm studied in the law. I went to Yale or I went to Princeton or I took a book and I studied it, law for 3 years and I understand the law. I don't need to belong to the bar. So being a member of the bar was completely optional. Then in 1871, I think it was February 22nd, sometime in February 1871, they started creating corporations. And the states and the United States became incorporated. Prior to that incorporation of the United States, mostly led by bankers and attorneys, the United States was we the people in our real flesh and our real human bodies. After they incorporated the states, and you can look through the old volumes prior to the American Civil War, and you can see United States is written with a capital U and a small n, capital S and a small t. After they incorporated, you started seeing the United States in all caps. What they were referring to is the corporate United States, which was not the same as the organic United States. And then they defined Washington, D.C., and then they created the 14th Amendment. But, oh, wait, they also had the Anti-Slavery Amendment, which they recalled as the 13th Amendment, which was a flaming lie. It was a big lie. It wasn't the 13th. I've just read you the 13th. The one they pushed through in 1866, right after assassinating the first lawyer president, Abraham Lincoln. That wasn't the 13th. The anti-slavery wasn't the first 13th Amendment. This book, an original, not a reprint, not something made up, has it right here on page 19 of this Statute of Connecticut from 1835. It's right there on the binder. If any citizen of the United States shall accept, claim, receive, or retain any title of nobility or honor, or shall, without consent of Congress, accept or retain any present, pension, office, or emolument of any kind whatever from any emperor, king, prince, or foreign power, such person shall cease to be a citizen of the United States, and shall be incapable of holding any office of any trust or profit under them or either of them. That's pretty clear. And that's the last amendment that existed from 1812 to 1866. Then they create a new amendment known as the Anti-Slavery, Anti-Involuntary Servitude Amendment, and they name that the 13th. And the lawyers by this time, remember the southern states were really being run by the military. From 1865 till about 1870, the U.S. Army literally ran the southern states. So when they were so-called readmitted, they really weren't readmitted as the real people. So many people raised the issue, did the United States cease to exist? Did the organic United States cease to exist? Because the southern states never rejoined correctly officially. They just sent these corporate shills. And at first they sent a lot of black congressmen. And the whites and the southern whites were outraged at this. And that caused, you actually had southern congressmen who were black, who were literate and could read and write. And you also had some that were very close to being illiterate. But they were elected because the U.S. Army was there forcing this and crushing this in the face of the white population, which didn't take well to having their former slaves now, or former freedmen that go on to the northern states, come back with the carpetbaggers, and suddenly they're in charge. Didn't sit well. Wasn't very long before the white supremacist movement got started just to get back equality of whites. That's a period of American history that is not very well covered, neither in college. But my important issue here is this original 13th Amendment. It has been hidden. Who hid it and what for? Well, it's real clear to me. If you joined a bar association, you accepted an honor, you in effect lost your citizenship. Well, if you're not a citizen, how can you be elected a prosecutor? How can you be elected a judge or anything else? How can a bar association, the bar is an international organization, it's a foreign power situated in a foreign city-state known as the City of London, which is not the same as London, England. The City of London is a designated area that is outside the control of the King or Queen of England or the Parliament of England. It's a city-state. If you don't believe this, go look up the YouTube. It's on YouTube, where you'll see the Queen of England once a year. She has her doorman go with a great big walking stick and a big metal club on the end of it. He knocks on the door or the gates to the City of London. You know, boom, boom, boom. The Queen of England requests permission to enter the city. And you think to yourself, she's already in the city. Well, she may be in the City of London, England, but now she's asking permission to the Rothschild banking combine to enter the city-state of the City of London, which is separate, very distinct area, different from the rest of London. Today it's the banking district, and the Rothschilds have many banking houses there, and they run things there, no questions asked, they're in charge. And you just have to see the Queen of England, Elizabeth, with her doorman knocking on the gate, requesting permission to enter. And you scratch your head and say, what is this? Anyhow, we're not going to show you that today. The point I wanted to make is there are things that are the established law of the United States under we the people. And there's two types of law. And it's really very different. Most of you don't recognize the difference, never even heard of it. And certainly a lawyer won't tell you about it. And certainly a bar association member is not going to tell you. There is on the right hand, the common law, which can be traced in Michael Warnken was on my show a decade ago, and he traced it right back to the Ten Commandments, the common law. It's based on what God set up, and it has evolved common law, and there were common law crimes like murder, trespass, mayhem, things like that. And there's a set of these felonies under common law. Then there's what they call the statutory law. The statutory law, in my opinion, is set up by Satan himself through the Bar Association. And the statutory law says if you scratch your nose on TV, you're guilty of a misdemeanor and you must go to jail for a year, or some ridiculous thing like that. Or you're rushing down a boulevard at 2 in the morning, nobody else is around anywhere, and the speed limit's 35, but you're going 65. You harm nobody, nobody else is in sight, yet you broke the speed limit. Therefore, under statutory law, they can take money from you and give it to their bank called a court. Well, under common law, you must injure somebody before they can take money from you. It's real simple. You must injure somebody, and then you have to make compensation to the person you injured. Under statutory law, it doesn't matter if you didn't hurt a flea. If you violated whatever, scratched your nose on TV, or pulled your ear on TV, or whatever, you violated a statutory code, now you must pay the bank, i.e. the court system, money. That's ridiculous. That's enslavement of God's people. So on one hand, you got the common law that derives from the 10 Commandments to protect God's people. And all they have to do is follow his 10 commandments. On the other hand, you've got 50,000 or more statutory codes, both civil and criminal, and there's not even an attorney can remember or know them all. You can learn how to look them up and search for them, but you can't know nobody, not even the best judge, not even Scalia or Alex Kaczynski or my favorite Judge Leonard Hand. Nobody could learn all the statutory. You violate something, you know what, the chances are good that every day you breathe, you probably violated 10 or 20 statutory codes. That's the difference between Satan's law, which you can't possibly know it all, and you're violating some code somewhere, someplace, and God's common sense, common law. You know, thou shalt not shed innocent blood. Pretty simple. Don't kill the innocent. Under statutory law, you can kill innocent unborn babies. Under God's law, thou shalt not shed innocent blood. How more innocent can you be than an unborn baby or a baby about to be born? That's the difference between God's law and statutory law. The criminals are in charge here because we do nothing. Which brings me to my next big subject. It's called the grand jury. And there's a code I've mentioned to you at least a dozen times in just this year of 2017. It's called U.S. versus Williams. It's found at 504 U.S. 36. I'll say that again for emphasis. 504 U.S. 36. Under this Supreme Court ruling, that's the United States, the Supreme Court of the United States, or sometimes called SCOTUS, under that, U.S. versus Williams at 504 U.S. 36, you ought to Google it if you've got internet and read it. The National Liberty Alliance, which I don't trust for a lot of reasons, and I wouldn't send them money, but they have a good synopsis of the bullet points. You can read it in 5 minutes. But if you read Scalia, the recently dead in Texas Supreme Court Justice Scalia wrote that majority opinion. He makes it clear, once this grand jury is formed, this isn't a new change. This has always been since the foundation of the United States of America back in 17 whatever. Now there's the National Liberty Alliance website. I don't trust those people. Don't send them money. But they have on their website the bullet points of Scalia's ruling, and they are awesome. And I recommend you read them only so they're in your head. But it says the grand jury is above the legislature, the judicial, and the executive branches. In other words, it's above all three branches. And Antoine Scalia, recently dead in Texas, did us a great service in 1992 when he wrote for the Supreme Court majority ruling. Since this group is above all three branches of government, they can indict even a judge, even a justice of the Supreme Court, because they're above all three branches. And he goes on to say he's reluctant to give any direction to the grand jury or restrictions on it because it's above the judicial branch. So once they're formed and they take office, their indictments have the force and effect as if a new constitution was being written. And the reason they are so powerful, and I always have to just applaud Antoine Scalia for his very astute ruling here and wording it in such a way he actually got a majority to agree with him. And it's always been that way. He just restated it. And it came out of a case of Mr. Williams. I don't think I've ever seen anything more awesome because it gives us, we the people, it gives we the people the power to fix our corrupt government. And there is no doubt in my mind, with all the fraudulent foreclosures going on, that the judicial system is so completely corrupt, you're lucky if you find 1 out of 50 judges that isn't going to succumb to the bank gangsters. There's an unwritten rule going right now. No matter what you bring to the court, they'll first try to keep your evidence off the record so it can't be appealed to SCOTUS. If they can't keep your evidence off the record, they'll rule for the bank anyway. It doesn't matter how fraudulently the bank behaved or whatever bank currently holds the broken assignment of your theoretical mortgage, and most of them that I've looked at recently aren't even real mortgages. They're not even deeds of trust or trust deeds. They're trickery. They're deception. They're fraudulent from inception, and they were designed that way. And Cindy Brown recently discovered this. So did many other people. So did David Fee and hundreds of others, or Renee Powers, former police officer Jack Sooty. He was right here in the studio as part of the California 18, and Jack Sooty was saying, I'm an ex-cop, and I can't get justice in the court system. And he's an ex-cop, retired cop, and he can't get justice. Well, if cops can't get justice, what chance do you and I have? The whole system we call courts are not the Article 3 courts. In the U.S. Constitution, if I'm going to open up, it's the same in the current printing, but I like to read from this 1835. Because I think it's apropos to look back. Section 3 of Article 3, treason against the United States shall consist only in levying war against them or in adhering to their enemies, giving them aid and comfort. No person shall be convicted of treason unless on the testimony of 2 witnesses to the same overt act or on confession in open court. The Congress shall have the power to declare the punishment of treason, but no attainder of treason shall work corruption of blood or forfeiture except during the life of the person attainted. That's the end of Article 3. Article 3 is all about the judicial power. So when I refer to Article 3 judges, what I'm referring to is judges that qualify under Article 3. The judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court and such inferior courts as the Congress may from time to time ordain and establish. The judges both of the Supreme and the inferior courts shall hold their office during good behavior and shall at stated times receive for their service compensation which shall not be diminished during their continuance of office. Prior to the establishment of the United States, there was the Articles of Confederation during the American Revolutionary War, and for the 4 years that had 4 separate presidents, all were president for 1 year, prior to George Washington, who was the first 4-year president. If a judge made an unpopular ruling, they would reduce the salary to that judge. That's why that's in there in Article 3, Section 1. It didn't happen all the time, but it was a way to punish judges that made correct rulings, but they were unpopular rulings. Remember, all those judges, not one of them had ever been a member of the Bar Association. There was no Bar Association at all. Didn't exist, I think, until the first one was in the city of New York in the 1840s or something like that, or 1850s. The judicial party shall extend in all cases of law and equity arising under this Constitution the laws of the United States and treaties made or which shall be made under their authority, to all cases affecting ambassadors, other public ministers, consuls, to all cases of admiralty and maritime jurisdiction, to the controversies to which the United States shall be a party, to controversies between two or more states, between a state and a citizen of another state, between citizens of different states, between citizens of the same state claiming lands under grants of different states, and between a state or citizens thereof and foreign states, citizens or subjects. Then it talks about ambassadors, trial of all crimes except in cases of impeachment shall be by a jury. Now, that sounds like nothing significant, but it's really significant. The Bar Association of several states, I think it was less than 30 years ago, was suggesting that we should do away with juries, have no more trials by juries. I find that not only reprehensible, but it points at the direction of corruption that the Bar Association wants to go to. And it got such a public outcry when these leaders of several different states' bar associations proposed doing away with juries altogether. Because sometimes they would come up with a verdict like the Oregon jury did about a year ago when the Bundys, Ammon and Ryan, were put on trial for going up to Harney County, Oregon, and trying to educate people on how to take back control of their government. The local crooks, aided and abetted by the FBI, the BLM, and other federal agencies, and a crooked sheriff who was appointed, not elected, they didn't like that. So they arrested him, set him up at the Malheur Preserve, set him up for arrest, killed Lavoy Finnegan in cold blood in the snow. No trial has been held for the murderer yet that I know of. He needs to be indicted by a grand jury of we the people, not one of these puppet grand juries appointed by a judge, led by the nose by some local or federal prosecutor, and then they let him off with 2 years probation or something for murdering a man who was the father of over a dozen children by one wife, Lavoy Finnegan. Murder him in cold blood? For what? For teaching people the Constitution and the way to clean up the corrupt government we have? There's a lot more to be concerned about than whether NFL players kneel in protest, stand in protest during the national anthem, or lock arms during the national anthem. All that to me is a diversion. We ought to be focusing on one issue: who is corrupting America? It's clear, in my opinion, it's the international bankers, starting with the Federal Reserve criminals. What do you think of that? The Federal Reserve Board of Directors arrest them all, indict them with a we the people grand jury, state by state, hold them without bail, just like Gloria Navarro, who recently wouldn't even let Ryan Bundy appear in court at a hearing. And his wife, Angie Bundy, just put up a video, I think it was yesterday. Let's roll. I want you to see this.
My take on Ryan's hearing this morning, he wasn't there. Baby and I were actually looking forward to seeing him, waving at him across the courtroom. There's something to be said about your spouse and being with your spouse, and you just feel whole and feel complete, and I don't feel that way ever. The closest I can feel that way is actually being in the courtroom with him, because he's just there. I mean, we're not allowed to touch. In fact, at first they didn't even want us waving or communicating at all, but to be in the courtroom with him just means something to me. And apparently he begged to go today, and they denied him his right to be at his own hearing. So when we got into the courtroom, Judge Navarro started, proceeding without him. She got him on the phone. He made it very clear. He goes, I need to be able to view the documents. I need to know what she's talking about. I need to be present at my own hearing. And so he just kept saying, I do not give my authorization for this to proceed. You can't go on without me being there. I object, I object to you proceeding without me. Now, we had a hearing a couple of weeks ago where Ammon wasn't there. The whole reason that these men are detained is to ensure that they get to court. Well, there's two reasons. One is if they're just extremely violent and need to be held away from people. And the second is to make sure that they are at court. Well, they've never proven that we're violent. In fact, they tested it. They tested their theories on shooting at the men and actually killing one and shooting my husband. And he didn't retaliate. So obviously they're not violent. So the only reason they need to be incarcerated is because they're not responsible enough to get to, to court. So they've held them this whole time, and now they're irresponsible enough that they're not even allowing the men to go to court. The other thing that I want to discuss is Ryan's standby counsel. Now, Ryan has opted to represent himself, but they almost demand that you have a standby counsel, somebody, there in case they want to revoke your right to defend yourself. Miss Dowse and Ryan have never gotten along. Not that they hate each other, but she doesn't seem to understand the case or care to understand, or I don't want to sit and badmouth her. But, there's been times she's just not shown a whole lot of care, or I guess when someone is speaking for you, and when you get someone to, of course, she's more of a standby counsel. She's not speaking for him. But if you want someone on your team, then you want somebody to believe in you and believe in what your cause is and what you're doing, and she's never shown any of that. And so from the get-go, he's asked her to, withdraw or remove herself or whatever, and today she tried to do that. She did try to do that, and the judge wouldn't allow her to. Okay, so not only are the men being denied the counsel of their choice, which in Ryan's case, he would just like to defend himself, but now they're being paired with people they don't want to be paired with. I don't want to say anything negative about Ms. Dowse, but we all know that there's people, in this world that we just don't see eye to eye with, and we don't really jive with, and we don't really get along with, and they just don't really get along. But she's being forced upon him. And here's my biggest problem with that. So let's say she does to Ryan what she's did to Todd Engel, which she's already hinting at that he's too incompetent to defend himself. Okay, so then we're liable to have to put Miss Dowse, who doesn't, I don't want to sit and speculate, but I don't know if she's even studied the case, in front of a jury when she doesn't even know, what was going on down here in 2014. So anyway, we just need to keep praying. We need to keep having faith. But my husband is not incompetent. He proved that up in Oregon, that he was very able to defend himself. So she can't pull that on him. She might try. She's already hinting at that. But I guess the whole reason I wanted to do a video was just to point out the fact that if the jail isn't going to be responsible enough to get the men to court, then it's time to release the men, because they will be responsible enough to get themselves to court. And that's what Ryan kept saying. He's like, the whole reason for my incarceration is to get me to court, and they're not even upholding that. He's been sat in jail this whole time so that he could be at hearings. Anyway, thanks guys for all you do, for paying attention, and hey, we've got to It's not good enough for us to just win this court case. We need people to be aware of all the injustices being done to so many in this country. So please keep your eyes open. Pray for guidance, and thanks for all you do. Bye.
Well, there it is, people. There was I think there was yesterday, Angie was there, and they had this hearing, and they excluded the defendant, Ryan Bundy, from his own hearing. This, to me, is treason by Judge Gloria Navarro in her kangaroo court. I mean, she's just a wicked witch. A wicked witch. I said, a wicked witch of the West. And she rides her broomstick to this federal courthouse every day in Sin City, also known as Las Vegas or Lost Wages, Nevada. Now, Article 7, getting back to what I said about the common law, I know the vast majority of you have never looked at the Constitution nor read it or any of its amendments. But Article 7 was one of the 10 passed immediately after the Constitution was adopted, because several states said, unless we have these Bill of Rights added immediately, we're not going to support this new Constitution. The Federalists, most of the Federalists did not want it, but here it is, Article 7, in suits at common law, where the value of controversy shall exceed $20, the right of trial by jury shall be preserved, and no fact tried by a jury shall be otherwise re-examined in any court of the United States. Notice United States is an upper and lower case. Do you see that? United States, then according to the rules of common law. Now, I want you to notice United States there is an upper and lower case. This is prior to incorporating the District of Columbia and an area known as the United States in all caps. This is before the corporate fraud started to take over America. And that's why these old volumes are very, very valuable, because they're proof positive of the changes, the subtle changes that has happened. So it suits at common law. Here's the trick. When they drag you into court over a speeding ticket, they're not dragging you into court under common law. And if you raise this issue and you say to the judge, excuse me, Judge Schmuck, or whatever name they have, they're all Schmuck to me, with very few exceptions. Excuse me, Judge Schmuck, but the Seventh Amendment says I have a right to a trial by jury. Where is my jury? And they will answer you, well, it's only an infraction, and you don't get a jury. Now, wait a minute. It's only an infraction, but you're going to fine me $250 for going 10 miles over a speed limit, or $500 or whatever. Think about that. They get to steal your money over something that's not even in the Constitution. It's an infraction. Well, what if I decide not to pay the money of this infraction? Because misdemeanors and felonies are mentioned in the Constitution. Infractions aren't. This comes under what they call their police authority or statute or authority. They created, again, in Satan's camp, by the attorneys, the twisters. Attorney means to turn, means to twist. So an attorney of the law is a twister of the law. And boy, do they do a lot of twisting. And most of you know that already. The point I'm trying to make is you and I, we the people, need to ignore these courts that are not Article 3 courts. And none of them are, except for the Supreme Court and the District Court in Washington, D.C. Those are legitimate Article 3 courts. And that's a whole long discussion that most of you will probably change the channel if I go into that. But you need to do some researching just on the grand jury. And that's why I urged you earlier to read, Google 504 U.S. 36, U.S. versus William, a 1992 case that no judge wants you to read and no attorney wants you to acknowledge it. but it was a Supreme Court, that's SCOTUS. SCOTUS is abbreviation for Supreme Court of the United States. SCOTUS made this majority ruling in 1992. And recently dead in Texas, Antoine Scalia, and I still can't figure out why he was in Texas, of all places, at a resort on the border of Mexico, where I don't think he'd ever been before in his life. At his age, why is he going there? I'd just like to ask that question. If you know, if you are in on his assassination, call me, let me know. I want to know what that was about. But I'm not saying he was assassinated. But I do know that JFK was assassinated, and not by Lee Harvey Oswald. And there are many books. Philip F. Nelson's got one of the easiest ones to digest on how LBJ, as vice president, helped in the assassination. And Tricky Dick Nixon was aware of it. And so was Clinton Murchison of Big Oil. And so had the gay cross-dressing FBI director Hoover, J. Edgar Hoover, whose best buddy, bumper butt buddy, was his number 2 guy at the FBI. And neither one of those guys ever married a woman. J. Edgar Hoover has no children, nor did his number 2 guy. But they were in, for different reasons, along with George Herbert Walker Bush, who was running the CIA operation to make sure the Secret Service didn't do their job the night before, November 22nd, 1963. This isn't a conspiracy wacko thing I dreamed up my head. This is documentation. And there's another book I want to bring to your attention, but not tonight. So you've got these bar association people working for the international bank gangsters, I call them. Some people like to make racial slurs about them. I don't want to use any of that. I just call them bank gangsters. I don't care if they're Catholic, Jewish, Protestant, atheist, or whatever. If they're working for the Bank Gangster International, they're bad dudes. We need to stop making ourselves upset whether someone kneels at the national anthem, or they stand up, or they lock arms. All that is like this crazy nonsense about North Korea attacking America. Ain't gonna happen. I remember 25, 35 years ago, they were saying these 2 little islands that belong to Free China, which we used to call China, we now call Formosa, and now we call Communist China just China. We used to refer to Communist China as Communist China. Always Communist China. Now we just call it China. And this big island where the Free Chinese actually had fled to, led by a dictator, but he was our dictator, so I guess that made it okay. But there were 2 little islands right next to them, and mainland China was threatening, we're going to have a war with the United States if you don't agree to stop defending Free China. And these 2 little islands belonged to Communist China, and they were deliberately creating this threat. Never happened. We never had a war. There wasn't even a battle, not even a skirmish over these 2 little islands. I can't even remember their names anymore. And that's the same thing with this North Korea is going to attack America. No, they're not. This is nonsense. This is absolute nonsense. Just like the theory that North Vietnam had captured one of our PT boats or some ship or something, and then North Vietnam had come out with their own PT boats and took over some small American Navy ship, and they were all forced to be prisoners until we got them. All that was lies by your corporate media. Complete lies. But we went to Vietnam War over a lie to make the bank gangsters rich on the national debt created by the Vietnam War. And it was right towards the end of the Vietnam War, 65 to 69, they phased out all silver dollars, all silver half dollars, silver quarters, silver dimes, all disappeared out of our coinage because the dollar had lost so much value from just printing and printing and printing and printing that the silver in a half dollar was worth 65 cents. So as a result, foreigners would get our half dollars and melt them down because you actually made money by melting down a silver half dollar because the dollar itself had lost value. And that silver coinage just disappeared out of circulation. By 1970, 71, you couldn't hardly find a silver coin in circulation anymore. That's what the Vietnam War was really about, making money for the international bankers. Today, the international bankers, having got away with so much crime, and there's an FBI report out, I put it at the top of my Facebook, and they said in 1910, the fraud the bankers were getting away with unconscionable. Yet nothing has been done. It's 7 years later. I don't see the Federal Reserve Board of Directors in jail. I don't see the attorneys for New York Mellon Bank in jail. I don't see all these guys in jail. We, the people, are going to have to get off our derrieres. We're going to have to put our elbow grease into our own grand juries. Counties like Santa Barbara probably need 10 grand juries at a minimum, each one 13 to 23 or 25 people, taking the correct oath of office. And then we're going to need the farmers, just like 220 some years ago, the farmers with guns and rifles to form a militia and make sure the We the People grand juries indictments makes the sheriff go arrest the crooked judges and the crooked attorneys, and there are plenty of them to arrest. They keep talking about they want to build a new jail in Santa Maria to hold all the bad guys. We'll need it to put the attorneys and judges in those jails. I believe they're entitled to a swift trial. And you can waive that right. But if everybody that they arrest and falsify false documents against would demand a speedy trial, they wouldn't be able to create the false evidence quick enough to make it stick. And when they went to trial by jury, the jury would say, that's a bunch of nonsense, not guilty, not guilty, not guilty, not guilty. And that's what happened in the Michael Jackson trial. What's interesting is Michael Jackson, as much as he is hated in this county, and he shouldn't be hated, he's loved in communist China, of all places. The fans love him, and now they've got a new Chinese guy who does a really fantastic imitation. Actually, he's a Mongolian guy. And communist China is giving this guy that imitates Michael Jackson singing so well, the government has given him his own jet to fly around China and Southeast Asia and do Michael Jackson songs in English. He's that good. But I digress. The important issue here is that it is a long tradition that the judges are not supposed to appoint grand juries. And the grand juries are not supposed to be led by a government-paid prosecutor. The grand jury is supposed to make an indictment. And then a prosecutor that may or may not be a member of a bar association, may or may not be a government employee permanently, can prosecute that case. Satan has got us turned upside down. I mean, people get upset about flying the flag upside down because that actually is a distress signal. And everybody in America should be flying their flags upside down because America is in deep danger, not from communist China, not from the fallen communist Russia, not from North Korea or Syria. We're in danger from the Bar Association. And several lawsuits have been filed against the Bar Association. And let me just tell you about one thing, you can look it up. Kamala Harris was Attorney General of California. Before she, her puppet controllers, her puppet masters, put her in as U.S. Senator. She had reallocated millions of dollars to her own personal secret account and hid it. One lawsuit by one attorney who knew what he was doing and where the money was forced her to give that money back. Forced her to give that money back. And then the corporate media did a total news blackout on it. Yet if you look up the case, it's on file. And Kamala Harris quietly gave the money back as she ran for U.S. Senator. She's a crook. She's as much a crook as Schwarzenegger was. As much a crook as George W. Bush and Dick Cheney and Rumsfeld were. In fact, I doubt that you can get anybody elected to high office who isn't a crook, because the bank gangsters control them. They're just puppets. And they teach the puppets you can steal as long as you give the banks what they want. And the judges know this too. And that's why they have this unwritten rule. No matter what your evidence is, if the bank's foreclosing on you, the bank is going to win. Doesn't care if the bank lost the note, destroyed the note, sold the note 10 or 20 times, doesn't matter. The bank is going to win. With very rare exceptions. Once in a while, you have an honest judge that will throw a bone. Do we have that Cliven video ready? I want you to hear from this guy. His name is Larry Cliven. I think he's worth hearing. This is really short. It's like only 3 minutes. He started Judicial Watch.
And now Freedom Watch. I'm currently the chairman and general counsel of Freedom Watch. And of course, as you also know, is that over the course of the last few years, we obtained a ruling by the court in Washington, D.C., a federal court, that mass surveillance of the American people was unconstitutional under the Fourth Amendment and illegal. As a result of that ruling, which occurred just after Edward Snowden had made the revelations of this mass surveillance, a new act came into existence in Congress called the USA Freedom Act, which was supposed to prevent more illegal surveillance, but it didn't. And the intelligence agencies under Obama, President Obama, continued on. Now, we've just learned yesterday that Paul Manafort, a campaign consultant and then manager of President Trump's presidential campaign, was wiretapped while he was actually the campaign manager. This means, since the president would have talked to him during that time period, that the president was wiretapped as well by the FBI. On top of that, we know that the FBI has buried an investigation that we caused. At least we thought it was going to be an investigation. Our client, Dennis Montgomery, a former NSA CIA contractor, came forward with 47 hard drives, over 600 million pages of information, showing that President Trump, when he was a businessman, his family and his staff was being illegally surveilled. We also showed that the Supreme Court justices were illegally surveilled, 156 judges, and even yours truly. Anybody who challenged any politician in Washington, D.C., or the intelligence agencies, or any establishment interest, was surveilled. This now validates what President Trump was saying, that he was in fact wiretapped, and we knew this all along. And it validates a court case that we currently have. Go to freedomwatchusa.org. freedomwatchusa.org. We filed suit, not just yours truly, but Dennis Montgomery, against James Comey for burying the investigation of this mass surveillance. Comey has committed obstruction of justice. And of course, his friend Robert Mueller, the special counsel, is furthering that obstruction of justice by simply investigating Trump, Manafort, and others, whether or not Manafort's guilty of anything or not. This has the effect of squashing investigations of this mass surveillance. And that is the way it works in Washington. The powers to be walk off without any kind of accountability. The lower level people get burned. Manafort will probably wind up getting burned in the end by Mueller. And that's why our cases are so important. So go to freedomwatchusa.org. Contribute generously to our cause. We are the mouse that roared. We are your Justice Department. Under the current Attorney General, you have no Justice Department. We are your Justice Department. So go to freedomwatchusa.org, contribute to our cause, get our free information that we email out, and other information. And I want to thank you for listening to this YouTube, because our civil liberties are in grave jeopardy. God bless you, God bless America, and God save America.
Thank you, Larry Cliven. He has a website. I'm not telling you should contribute or not, but I thought you ought to hear it from him. Our government is now a government of criminals, all protecting each other. The judges, the bank gangsters have bought off Congress. 90% of Congress is in the pocket of the bankers. If you don't believe that, I challenge you, go to the FCC and look at all your congressmen and then look who their major contributors were. They're all CEOs and executives of this bank, that bank, other big corporations that are subsidiaries of a bank holding company. They're not listening to you or me. They couldn't care less. If they were, the Bundys never would have been indicted at all, and Gloria Navarro, who was appointed on a Christmas Eve recommendation of that crooked Harry Reid, and I believe to the pit of my soul, Harry Reid has stolen money, public money, and nobody is going to do anything about it unless you, the people, demand that the Bundys be set free and Harry Reid formally investigated, indicted, and prosecuted, along with Gloria Navarro, that kangaroo court judge in Las Vegas who won't let Ryan Bundy, as you heard from his wife a few minutes ago, won't let Ryan Bundy even appear to defend himself in court while they have a hearing directly on point on his upcoming trial. Now you can write to the Bundys, and I hope you do. Ryan Bundy, Ammon Bundy, we have their addresses. But I think we'll flash those addresses as you watch the official Bundy trailer so you get an understanding. Their crime was raising cattle for steaks for you and your family to eat, for hamburger, for meatloaf. That's their crime. Because Harry and his son, attorney Rory Reid, who was almost governor, want to steal the ranchers' land and sell it in LLCs to a communist Chinese front organization to strip mine the place. And there's a whole lot the corporate media is not telling you. I'm just trying to give you some of the highlights to pique your interest. Anyway, I think this guy, Galen Sim, did a great video. It's called The Official Bundy. We'll watch that, and I'll flash the addresses. I hope you're right, the Bundys in their private jail. The trial starts the 10th of October, unless you convince President Donald Trump to grant them full pardons, which he should. They should have never been put in jail in the first place. They are the true victims, standing up for your rights. Listen to the Bundys.
My name is Ammon Bundy. I am speaking to you today from inside a maximum security jail. I am the son of a Nevada cattle rancher. My father, brothers, and myself have been incarcerated for many months, leaving our wives and 26 children altogether without fathers to care for them. I ask that you listen to our story and judge us. Yes, judge us. Ask yourself if we were justified in standing for our ranch and the rights of our neighbors. Or should we have just let federal agencies take our heritage? Ask yourself, what would have you done? Ask yourself what is right. Let me explain our story. My brothers and I grew up on a family cattle ranch in southern Nevada, established by our great-great-grandfathers in 1877. We were raised in humble circumstances in the same little ranch home as our father, Cliven Bundy, built by my grandfather Dave in the 1940s. For 5 generations, our family has run cattle along the Bunkerville Mountains. Our ancestors were the first pioneers to settle in the southern Nevada desert. They carved their living out of leveling and farming land next to the Virgin River and ran cattle on the hills. Their homesteads were established before Las Vegas had even one person living in it. Nevada had only been a state for 13 years. Discovering multiple springs on the foothills of the mountains, our forefathers began to build water troughs and holding tanks to supply water for cattle. This made it so the cattle did not have to travel too far for water. In the arid desert where a ranch is, it takes approximately 100 acres to feed one cow. In his lifetime, my father has improved upon this watering system by installing pipes throughout the lower hills from 11 different water sources over a 30-mile span. This has allowed the cattle to benefit from feed in areas where otherwise they could not live because they would have to walk too far for water. This has also greatly benefited the desert wildlife and made hunting and camping plentiful. As a true environmentalist, my father, by expanding the water system and caring for the land and the road, has tremendously promoted wildlife, increased game, improved camping, and generally made the area more enjoyable to be on. Even the desert tortoise would thank Cliven Bundy for the water close by if they could speak. All of this is done at my father's expense and effort, costing the taxpayers nothing. With his banged-up Dodge pickup, my father would spend many days a month blowing out the water lines with air and repairing the leaks, making sure each water tank was always full. My family has brought life to the southern Nevada desert for over 100 years. Imagine what would happen to all the wildlife if this watering system was not maintained or if it was destroyed. Before I move on, it is important that you have a little more background about the legality of our water and grazing rights. In 1890, the state of Nevada created a registry so that ranchers and others could deed their water and grazing rights. In Nevada, as with other western states, the livestock water rights include title to graze. Each deed in print designates how many cattle the owner of the deed is typically grazing around the water. This is the way grazing rights are recorded and protected by the state of Nevada. Just to be clear, these livestock grazing and water rights are vested property, much like mineral rights or deeded rights to your home. These grazing rights are real property. They can be sold, traded, borrowed against, or adversely taken. They are the lifeblood of our ranch and are a valued heritage to our family. Many people have desired to purchase them over the years, but my father has chosen to remain raising cattle in the desert. Without these stock water grazing rights, our ranch has almost no value. My father owns 11 of these stock water grazing rights, deeded with the state of Nevada. In the early 1990s, the Bureau of Land Management, also known as the BLM, an agency of the executive branch, tried to trespass my father for grazing cattle on our deeded range, where my family has run cattle for 138 years. The BLM adopted an extreme environmental no cattle policy designed to remove all ranching from the land. On the wall in the Southern Nevada BLM district office, they displayed their motto. It read, "No moo by 92, cattle free by 93. Seeing their intent to destroy his ranch, my father stood on the fact that his ranch was inside the boundaries of the state of Nevada, that the federal agencies are violating the constituted laws between the state and the federal government, and that he owns a deeded right to graze and water his cattle, established over a century ago. When agents from the Bureau of Land Management told my father that the federal government does not recognize his grazing rights and that my father must remove his cattle, he told them that they had no authority to take his family's heritage away. When they said they were going to take it away anyway, he said no, and then he said hell no. Several times the Bureau of Land Management tried to drag my father into federal court so they could strip him of his rights, like they have done with thousands of others. Being land inside the state of Nevada, not ceded to the federal government, my father held the constitutional position that federal agencies have no legal constituted authority to administer the land inside the state, and therefore no jurisdiction to trespass or prosecute him. Watching other ranchers, miners, loggers try to defend themselves in federal court when the federal government was the plaintiff, my father often said, "Going into federal court to defend yourself against federal agencies is like as if a man broke into your home and beat up your wife and children. So to get justice, you take him to court. When they say all arise to the honorable judge, In walks a man in a black robe, and he is the very man that assaulted your wife and children. Of over 100,000 cases in the western states where the federal government is the plaintiff in federal court, federal judges have sided with federal agencies every single time, taking century-old vested property rights away from good, hard-working families. In our area, my dad is the last rancher out of 53. In the state of Nevada alone, federal agencies have taken 5,072 water rights from the people and deeded them to themselves. It is astonishing to think about this when the United States Constitution was specifically designed to prohibit this very thing from happening. We, the people, have ignorantly allowed federal agencies of the executive branch to be modern-day conquerors, gobbling up our land and resources and inserting themselves into every facet of our lives. Our homes, our schools, our churches, our jobs, our industries, our manufacturing industries, our housing industries, our agricultural industries, our mineral industries, our financial industries. Everywhere there is wealth, they seek to control and take. They will not stop expanding and growing on their own. They will not limit themselves because they do not produce a product. In order for them to survive and gain and grow, they must take from the people who produce a product. The judicial branch of government, the courts and the judges, have not been an effective check and balance to these agencies for over 60 years, giving them a free pass to prey upon the wealth of the American people. U.S. Congress has tried to stop them twice in the last decade by defunding them. We saw through this that the executive agencies are too powerful for even the United States Congress to limit. So how did people come to know about the Bundy family, my family? Well, in April 2014, the BLM joined forces with 4 other federal agencies to enforce their unlawful trespass and destroy our ranch. They set up a massive military-like compound on the range. With 200 hired guns, mercenaries, they surrounded our ranch and put it under siege. They began to brutally round up our cattle with helicopters, running them to death, shooting them from the air, and leaving the newborn cows out on the range to thirst to death or to be eaten by coyotes. The dead cattle were dumped into mass graves dug by federal backhoes. They also began destroying the water infrastructure that had been established over 100 years ago. Our family was threatened by BLM personnel that said, if we resisted in any way, this would be another Waco or Ruby Ridge. Knowing beforehand the abuses that they were about to cause would bring public outcry, the BLM built 2 First Amendment areas in non-conspicuous places and threatened the public with arrest and federal charges if anyone protested outside these areas. Our family, friends, and other local people began to protest first. They insisted not to have their First Amendment rights corralled and refused to protest in these remote, designated areas. With hired snipers on the hills, federal agents began to gang beat protesters for filming their abusive actions. For several days, they body slammed us to the asphalt, sicked dogs on us, tased us, and threatened to open fire on us for protesting on what they said was their property, even standing next to State Highway 170 with guns to our heads and our children's heads. Federal agents said that the road belonged to the state, but the earth under it belonged to them. Much of this abuse was caught on video and was posted on the internet. Within hours, millions had viewed the gross actions of these federal agencies. People from all over the United States began flowing to the ranch. That Saturday, thousands had assembled and demanded the Clark County Sheriff Department and the state governor to do their jobs in protecting the people from out-of-control federal agencies. The Clark County Sheriff's Department finally stepped in and ended the abuse. All federal agents left the area within an hour, and the surviving cattle were brought back to the ranch to be doctored or turned out on the range, and then we went back to ranching. This infuriated the bureaucrats. People such as Harry Reid, who has personally made millions off of land deals with the Bureau of Land Management, publicly came out against our family and the people that stood up to them, calling us domestic terrorists, threatening that this was not over. Many of us wore name tags that read, "Hi, my name is so-and-so, and I'm a domestic terrorist." Great-grandmothers, little children, and everyone in between wore them proudly. Since then, federal agencies have mounted a continual media campaign to demonize my family and those that stood against their horrific actions. In defense, we've had to respond by publishing the truth. My mother, sisters, and many of our friends and family have done the best we could to stop them from controlling the narrative. We knew that if they could change the public sentiment, they would once again justify forceful action against us. In an effort to make sure that this did not happen to any more families in Nevada, in early 2015, my family, along with several state representatives, entered a bill into the Nevada legislature. This bill would end the federal land grabs in the state and force the federal government to follow the Constitution to control land inside the state. Bill AB 408. It was the most publicly supported bill in the Nevada history. Despite its popularity, bureaucrats united together from within and changed the text of the bill right before it was voted on. The new text gave them more power rather than take it away. It was a full array of politics at its finest. On the last day of the House vote, we had to kill our own bill, hoping that Nevada legislatures would stand up to federal agencies and protect families like ours. We left Carson City with our heads hanging low and went back to ranching, working, and raising children. Before I go on, I need to say that even though our family is suffering great pain and sorrow right now, we do not hate or harbor anger for anyone. We pray daily and diligently for those who have and continue to harm us. We love the Lord Jesus Christ and desire in the end for all of us, even those that have spitefully put us in these jails, to find peace and happiness through His forgiveness and example. Through these great tribulations, we have strived to follow the Lord and do only as He has asked. Now let me go on. Now let me go on. Towards the end of 2015, many became aware of another ranching family in Oregon, the Hammonds, where the father, Dwight, 74, and the son, Stephen, 43, had been put in prison for resisting federal agencies of the executive branch in taking their lands. The abuse to this family over 2 decades is terrible. Federal agencies of the executive branch teamed together and have taken their water rights, destroyed much of their ranch, restricted use of private property and access to it. Through the courts, they have taken hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines, forced them to sign that they would only sell their ranch to the BLM, and put them in prison the second time for doing maintenance on their ranch without a permit from the Bureau of Land Management. All of this was done inside the state of Oregon on private property or land that federal agencies do not have constituted authority to administrate. These same tactics are being used to take established property rights all over the United States. The EPA, an agency of the executive branch, is using the same playbook in the eastern states. Before federal agencies diminished ranching and destroyed logging in Harney County, where the Hammonds lived, the county had the highest family incomes in the state of Oregon. Now families in Harney County struggle with the lowest incomes in the state. Over the last 30 years, Harney County has consistently declined in incomes, population, and jobs because of the federal government's overtake of the land and resources. The best hope of employment anyone has now in Harney County is working for a federal agency of the executive branch, the BLM, Forest Service, or Fish and Wildlife. Government employment tallies at 58% of Harney County income. This percent does not include those on government assistance. Together, approximately 70% of Harney County residents depend on the government for their living. The remaining minority, the producers, are choking from forceful regulation and live in fear of retaliation if they speak out. Those that do speak out against the federal agencies, like the Hammonds, are targeted, demonized, their lands are taken, they are prosecuted and thrown in prison. What has happened to us, the Hammonds, and the people of Harney County is a type and a shadow of what is happening to our entire country. We must stop federal agencies of the executive branch from taking over and controlling the producing class. Federal agents have shown they are willing to destroy entire state and county economies and put the American people in prison to protect, increase, and justify their gain and control. It is rapidly coming down to federal agencies gaining control or the American working class. And these federal agencies of the executive branch have been building up heavy military forces to make sure their projects of ambition are not limited. Look at what they put us in jail for: conspiracy to impede a federal officer's duties. Or in other words, resisting them from doing what they want to do. Federal agencies have conspired for years in impeding the jobs and taking the incomes of the American working class, diminishing states, counties, and destroying more incomes and livelihoods than any other people in the history of this country. When someone finally stands up and says no more, when that person says to federal agencies, your duties are unlawfully destroying our livelihoods and destroying our states, our counties, our future, and our children's future, when this message becomes loud enough that people take notice, federal mercenaries hired by agencies of the executive branch move in, shoot and arrest the messengers, and drive fear into anyone that might stand up. Federal agencies of the executive branch are willing to kill and destroy families to protect their ambitions to get gain. Just ask the Finnecum family or the 26 Bundy children with their fathers locked up, if I speak the truth. No moral principle, tradition, heritage, livelihood, or way of life, or life itself appears to be more important than their ambitions to get gain. Produce nothing, take everything. Modern-day robbers. In my 40 years, I have seen a stomach full of my hard work.
Well, we won't get to the end of that tonight, but I'll show it to you again another day. Remember, the trial starts October 10th unless you get President Trump a letter and say, full pardon for all the Bundy defenders, convicted and unconvicted, full pardon for the Bundy family. The reason the Second Amendment was important, in order for a well-regulated militia to protect the people. That's what the Second Amendment was about. These people that came, Drexler, Stewart, Loveleen, Parker, were the militia. They were called on to show up and defend the land against the foreign invaders, the Bureau of Land Management, invading state lands that had already granted the Bundys grazing rights in this desert land where you and I would not want to live or even try ranching. I'm William Wagener, saying thank you very much for watching. Pay attention, watch the reruns coming up. Remember, we're on the air every day of the week now. Thanks for watching, people. Here's A.J. Nicholas with a song about the red-haired girl
with the dark red hair. Yeah, that girl, would you stop and stare? Yeah, that girl, she is the prettiest in my world. That girl with the dark red hair. Then we went out to the park just a little after dark. I got the girl with the dark red hair. And I brought my new guitar, but we didn't get that far. I got the girl with the dark red hair. Now she's holding on my arm like a cutie good luck charm. I got the girl with the dark red hair. We'll carve our names into the tree and it'll last a century. I got the girl with the dark red hair. Yeah, that girl with the dark red hair. Yeah, that girl, would you stop and stare? Yeah, that girl, she is the prettiest in my world. That girl with the dark red hair. And there's not enough time for all that I want to do. Not enough time for every kiss. Not enough time for all that I want to do. We're running out of time. She's sitting in my bedroom and I think I need some headroom. You're the girl with the dark red hair. And she looks into my eyes and it makes me want to cry. I got the girl with the dark red hair. Should I ask her for permission or will I just keep on wishing? You're the girl with the dark red hair.